For all of human history, being a citizen of the dominant empire typically meant that you were afforded certain luxuries that were the envy of all provincial and conquered people alike. Whether that was access to goods, wealth, infrastructure, safety, those were all yours for the taking. And this is just true for all time. But here we are, the center of the wealthiest, largest, most powerful empire in the history of the world. And I got to tell you, the trajectory, it's not looking too good. It's not the same for us. You know, safety isn't really something that Americans truly expect to have anymore. And it's actually wild, like the baseline amount of anxiety and fear that Americans just live with every single day. You know, this is a country where there's a constant low-level chance of having a violent interaction with a minority, a crazy person, anything. You actually don't know. You know, just the other day in Columbus, there's a police-involved shooting of get this, a pregnant black woman that was stealing booze from the grocery store. Yeah. So anyway, she tried to run over the cop, and the cop shot her, and well, she died. That's no good. You don't want that. But so one of our friends actually here, he messaged me yesterday to let me know that the cops were turning people away from the store because they were expecting rioters. Very nice. That's just like a new thing that we deal with now. So, you know, naturally he went back to the safety of his hotel or Airbnb, and well, when he gets there, there's just gunshots going around. Yeah, like, what's going on? It's a really nice town. It's a good place. And you know, the thing is that this type of stuff in any other day and age, like not even that long ago, a couple decades ago, this would be considered like shocking and unbelievable newsworthy events. But I know for a fact everybody in here, you just accepted that. Like, yeah, that sounds right. That's what happens. It's just commonplace and uninteresting. So, as an American, it can be kind of hard to truly appreciate just how rough it can be here. It's like a fish that, you know, it can't see the water because it's swimming in it, you know. But when you go outside of the country, you can see this a lot more. You know, and I've told this story on a couple of the shows, but I'll do it again. I visited a couple of friends in Canada a few years ago. There was a nationalist conference up there. And, you know, my friends were telling me, like, hey, don't go to this neighborhood, don't go to that neighborhood. It's rough, it's real bad. So naturally, I went because the idea of, like, a Canadian hood was really, really funny to me, you know? But, you know, I get there, and it's basically exactly what you expect. A picturesque, middle-income neighborhood that any of us would be just happy to raise a family in, you know? And then they're like, don't go, man. I was like, what? Like, I live in Dayton, Ohio. This is great. What are you talking about? You know, later on in the night after the conference, everybody like just went to get on the bus, you know, like the subway, whatever. And this is like girls, like young girls, like riding like transit alone. I'm like, wait, hold on, what's going on? Because in America, our public transit is basically a portable toilet that's used to, you know, move criminals around to shopping centers to break into cars and steal radios. So I thought that was strange. But, you know, the whole thing had me homesick, though. It was too nice up there. It was just weird, you know. Kilometers, a lot of Indian people. It was weird. But, you know, I crossed the bridge back into Detroit, and as I'm passing all the potholes, the garbage, and, like, dead pit bulls on the road, and I'm not kidding, there's a dead pit bull immediately, you know, I felt home. I knew I was home. It's beautiful. So after the 2020 George Floyd riots, and I mention this every single time, but violent crime skyrocketed nationwide. And they called it a racial reckoning, which I feel like if that's not a direct threat, I don't know what is. And they just say that on the news, and you just accept that. Like, oh, yeah, it's the reckoning, you know? So across the board, though, violent crime, and that's muggings, carjackings, murder, it's up almost 30%. I don't have the exact number in front of me. Almost 30%. That's a big deal. In 3 years, murder? Whatever. And you know, this is major cities, this is non-metropolitan cities, this is the suburbs. You know, so this isn't like a city or a country thing. And I've always actually hated that, and some of you guys, you've probably heard me really dunking on people for that. The whole, oh, in the country, well, no. This is happening everywhere. You know, the idea that whites just get what they deserve when they live in a city that their ancestors built is like the most like cowardly, reactionary, pathetic type of thinking you can even imagine. You know? And when you see that stuff, you got to call it out. It's a coat, big coat. You know, maybe that's more prevalent in the States. It's a younger country, whatever. We move on average more than Europeans. I don't know. There's a lot that goes into that. But you know, imagine you're in France. You're talking to a French woman. You know, like, oh, you were sexually assaulted by a migrant in Paris? Why would a French person even be living in Paris? That's pretty goofy. You know, or oh, you were attacked in the streets by an African in Athens? What's a Greek doing in Athens? You know? But that's really, telling that to a white person living in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, that should be just as absurd here. Those cities are ours. But you know, that's cities and the suburbs, though. They wouldn't try that in a small town, right? Well, you can tell that to Travis and Greg McMichael, who are going to be spending and if we don't win, they're going to be spending the rest of their lives in prison because they defended their neighborhood from a black criminal that charged them and tried to take their gun away. The small town thing is a big cope too, because the federal government works overtime to make sure your rural zip code is going to get diversified. And and they're sending whatever they have. It doesn't matter where they're from. That's a big thing in New York right now. Yeah, they're in New York City, but you know, you got to ship them out to like the smaller places, literally the small towns. You got to do it. You know, something similar is actually happening in the town that I live in, which is very unfortunate. And the way this works is when there's areas that aren't diverse enough, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development provides grants to developers to build what they're now calling workforce housing. Yeah. Now, everybody knows what that means. That's Section 8. They just, you know, it's a cute new way of saying it, so it's not too scary, right? Workforce, working, that's good. But everybody sees through that. They know what's going on. You know, despite this being an active government program, the way it's discussed, though, is like this is just the hidden hand of the market. You know, they're just building houses. They're just, you know, no big deal. Even though like I said, it's an active government program, and we're powerless to do it. It's market forces. Because yes, there were definitely locals looking around their nice, quiet suburb, thinking we could use like 1,000 Somalis here. Which for the people that live in, like, around this area, boy, we have some issues with Somalis. We could tell you some nightmare stuff. Actually, the whole Somalian thing, even, like, committed, dug-in liberals up here, except, like, you just can't, these guys, this does not work out. Can't teach them to drive, nothing. I'm not even kidding. It's a whole thing, man. But again, this isn't a market response. This is evil bureaucrats choosing who gets to live around you and your family, basically on a whim. You know, and I wonder if people ever stop to think about how many thousands of hours of manpower and how much money it costs to import just one African into the middle of America. Like, think about that. Like, think about, like, the level of technology and money and organization it takes to get a guy from Liberia, Somalia, Ethiopia, whatever, to, like, Iowa. That's goofy, you know? Say, our friend here from Fargo, they have a big issue with Liberians in Fargo, North Dakota. What? That's what I'm saying. But frankly, when there's something that is both expensive and not in the interest of anybody, you know that decision is made with purposeful malice behind it. And you know, safety applies to more than just your physical well-being and protection from migrants, whatever, you know, random minorities. It's also your wealth and it's your purchasing power. And in America, people are working more, saving far less, And what they do save, it's worth so much less than it was even like a year ago. You know, I know every time, and this is probably true for everybody, every time I go to the store, I'm stunned by how much it costs to feed a family. You know, me and Warren, every time we're on the phone, we'll discuss that. Yo, this is nuts. This is hundreds of dollars. But I keep insisting, though, inflation's under control. We got it. That's obviously nonsense. Like anybody that has a family that has to pay for anything knows that's nonsense. But despite the racial tension, the forever wars, and zero social participation, you know, America at least had the promise of cheap stuff. Now that's gone. You know, come on. Sucks. You know, and since I got some figures here, right? Since 2019, the cost of a car has actually increased by nearly 20%. Nearly 60% of young adults aren't making enough to move out of their parents' house, so they stay living at home. The national median sale price of a home in 2019 was $297,000, which is a lot more than my house, but all right. 3 years later, that same figure has increased to $431,000. That's a 45% increase. And remember, and remember, millennials and Gen Z people, we were already complaining about the price of homes, and here we are. So buying's out of the question, right? Young people are just going to have to rent. Well, according to the US Census Bureau, the average rental cost is $2,062, and rent on average in this past year has increased by over $250 per month. So, yes. And this is just crazy. This is just kind of an aside. The first real place my wife and I rented back in the day, this is less than 10 years ago. Big house, 3-bedroom house, attached garage, big yard. The yard sucked, but it was big. You know, it was $750 a month. Like that same thing, I looked it up. It's like $1,300 now. Millennials, my generation, we had the tiny house trend that everybody did. You remember that? Yeah, it's very cringe and already a big cope for, you know, housing prices. But Gen Z, the tiny house they're going to have is living in the back seat of like their 2010 Ford Fiesta. That's not good. You know, my main point to this whole thing is that it doesn't really matter if you want to participate in the system or drop out. There's just really not an option for you to live the way that you want to anymore. You know, say you want to drop out and be left alone. Say you want to start running a homeschool curriculum that isn't about white self-hatred or Jew worship. Is that an option for you? No. It might even become a nationwide story, and every multi-billion-dollar media company will try to make your life hell for it. Might even land you on The Daily Show, getting just wowed by whatever hack is on it now. It's that South African guy, right? Terrible. Oh, is he gone? Is it D.L. Hughley? So we had the white guy in the early 2000s, then John, the Jew. Leslie Jones? Yeah, Donkey Kong. That's not good. Good God. On TV? Damn. Really? Wow. Good Lord. What a train wreck. But, you know, the way the media operates, and we've mentioned this before in different speeches, several of us have, this is called stochastic terrorism. This is where people in power will try to direct your anger towards basically like helpless people and terrorizing them into shutting up or stopping whatever they're doing or moving, whatever. They also have the ability just to bury a story, dynamic silence, no matter what it is. Anything that's going to make a white person seem sympathetic, even if they're objectively a victim, they just don't need to cover that. Interesting example. The very same town that the dissident homeschool couple was from, there was an anti-white murder just a couple weeks before it. It might have, like a week or two. It was right before that story went viral. But an Ethiopian migrant went into a local Dollar Tree and cut the head off of a 22-year-old newlywed white woman. Yes. And that story came and went. In local news, not even national. It happened nearly as fast as the crime itself. It just gone. I don't know, in like smaller towns, again, try that in a small town, that seems like something worthwhile, but okay. So if you're a committed liberal, you believe in the system, you're bought in Biden, bro. I also wonder what it is you're getting out of this. What does America offer you? Central points of Biden's campaign, like affordable housing, student loan debt, just scrapped. Just day one, everybody knew, we're not doing that. In fact, Biden's answer now, this is a sort of newer story, his answer to the student loan question is, pay up, dummy. We need that money. So the guy who proposed it is now pounding on the door demanding his check. So that's just gone. Give it up. But why? It's not like our government is particularly responsible with money. And they just can't bring themselves to print more. Why can't the government just buy up the debt? And if they're absolutely opposed to forgiving it, repackage it in a low-interest loan for people. They could just do that, and that'd be a very stable loan, too. But they're not going to do that. Now, remember PPP loans during COVID. You guys remember that? The government was able to give out billions and practically no interest loans to every NGO, fake, real, whatever. Basically, if you applied, you got the cash. Check this out. The ADL managed to get, and I made sure to get the numbers right. I've heard that they're very litigious people that they employ. But the ADL was able to get $7,400,615 in a PPP loan. Yes, that is straight a gift from the government. And in what must be pure dumb luck, or maybe an accounting error, they managed to get $7,486,381 forgiven. They got more forgiven than they borrowed. What are the chances of that? Can you believe it? I think a young man or a young woman going to school to get a degree, no matter what the degree is, I don't even care, are far more deserving of debt forgiveness than Jonathan Greenblatt and the Jews and the Shabbos Goy that sit in the offices making sure that white people don't have a voice in this country. Call me crazy. And the same is true for your average apolitical, just normal person that does everything right, And this is actually a really personal story, and I kind of waffled on if I was going to include this or not, but I have a family member that's going through a very, very major health issue at the moment, and she needs a kidney transplant. She's on the waiting list, everything like that. Both of her parents are college educated. They're both employed. They pay their bills. They pay for health insurance. But none of that has done them a bit of good through all of this. Their best bet now is actually, and this is true, to file a divorce so they can file their taxes separately and try to qualify for Medicaid, which isn't always guaranteed. They still could just get denied. Or they can just end up bankrupt. That's always an option. They don't really want to do that. And, again, this is when food, services, rent, everything is surging. And stories like this aren't even uncommon. This is just one that's close to me. And the amount of hoops that Americans have to jump through just to get by, or sometimes not even get by, it just makes me sick, And I feel like everybody has to see this. Everybody knows that there's nothing for them here. So what are you holding on to? Our ruling class is composed of out-of-touch career politicians, ideologically incited neoliberals. They're Jewish puppeteers, and they're all willing to make working white people's lives significantly worse to carry out their political goals. They absolutely do not care. For example, just ask the railroad workers a few months ago that tried to strike just to get a couple sick days. They had one, they said maybe we can do two. Biden, the stroke of a pen, said, I don't think so. Absolutely not. Get back out there. Yeah. Well, yes. Meanwhile, the Hollywood writers' strike is like a big deal right now, and we're all in solidarity with them. I want to make sure David Duchovny gets every penny he deserves, okay? That's a big deal to me. But that's like a big glamorous thing. I see people on Facebook, because I still have one. I won't after I say this. But I see just weird people defending these millionaires like, oh, solidarity. What? What are you talking about? But okay. You know, shortage, the thing is that shortage and inflation, it doesn't affect capitalists, it doesn't affect Jews, it doesn't affect politicians in any meaningful way. They can just basically vote to give themselves a pay raise whenever they want, so it's never going to matter. You know, meanwhile, the poorest Americans are reduced to sub-minimum wage earnings, gig work, nonsense jobs, and a service economy, whatever that means, while their tax money is being sent to fund a conflict halfway around the world that none of them even really care about. So there's absolutely, again, no buy-in to the system. And the only people that are actually buying houses anymore are people like Larry Fink and BlackRock. Yeah. The only people actually saving money are the previously mentioned war profiteers like Raytheon and Boeing. They've got all the money in the world right now. By the way, both of these are examples of companies that we will nationalize on day one should we take power, 100%. As Jacob said, you might not like it, but that's the plan. You know, but when the game is as rigged and is as unfair as it is, you know, especially when you can see the people that are changing the rules right in front of you and laughing about it, you know, when they're literally harming you and your family, first you have to stop playing the game. Then you need to flip the table and start making your own rules. So that's why you're going to need to vote for NJP when we start running people. And that's the plan. Thank you.